There's a lot of rubbish flying around on social media around how to invest your money, advice, tips, tricks, hacks, get rich quick schemes. But for the most part, this is nonsense. So here are my 3 core principles to invest in as a chartered financial planner. So the first one is your 3 buckets. Now, I go through this process with all of my clients. The 3 bucket process is essentially about having your emergency cash pot, then your short-term savings pot, and your long-term investment pot. Now, there are 2 sides either side of that: clearing debt and inheritance tax planning. But I'm going to focus on those middle 3. So your emergency cash pot, this is where you need to have access to liquidity pretty much immediately. So your boiler breaks, your car breaks down, anything that you can conceivably imagine that you may need to fork out some cash for in a very, very short space of time is what your emergency pot will provide you with. As a general rule of thumb, if you're working with regular income, 3 to 6 months worth of expenditure is a good amount to have in your emergency pot. For a lot of people, that might sound like more than they have. So I'm not trying to scare anybody, but that is probably round about what you should have. Now, the reason that pot should be much smaller than these other 2 pots is because of the erosion of the value of cash over time. Cash should only really be used for a currency to exchange for the goods or services or things that you need in life. Anything that's longer term than that, you need to be diversifying away from cash because it's only going to be worth less in the future than it is today. The second pot is your short-term savings. You might be thinking about buying a house in the next 2 or 3 years' time. You might be thinking about buying a holiday home, buying a car. Large expenditure that you know that you've got coming over the horizon. Now, for those sorts of expenditures, you should not be having any money invested in really anything other than cash, because you can't guarantee over a 1, 2, 3 year period that you'll get a positive return. Market crashes can and will happen. And if that does happen at the time when you're just about to pull that money out to buy that thing that you need, it could have a disastrous impact. So the best thing to do here is do some research. Martin Lewis is a name I will continuously shout out because he's great at giving you the information that you need to find the best short-term cash savings accounts, whether that be ideally in an ISA, so you're not paying any tax on the interest, or in instant access savings accounts if you've got too much to put into an ISA in 1 year. That might be over a fixed term, might be a year, might be 2. That'll depend on how much you know about what you're going to be spending that money on. Now, that should give you a higher interest rate than an instant access account. So in that sense, just do your own research. The third pot is your investment pot. Now, this is where you need to have a bit of an understanding around the different types of tax structures in terms of where you should be putting your investments. Pensions are brilliant from a tax perspective. So with a pension, anything that you put into it, you'll get tax relief on. Now, where does that come from? Well, the idea is that a pension contribution should be tax-free. So any money that you put into a pension should be done so without paying tax. So if you're paying from taxed income, tax relief is essentially you getting back the tax that you've paid on the cash you've used to add into your pension. Once inside the pension, any growth you get is tax-free, any interest that's derived is tax-free, and any dividend that's earned is tax-free as well. So those benefits mean that by the time you get to your retirement, any growth that you will have achieved inside your pension can't be touched by HMRC. The other key tax structure would be ISAs. And for the long term, really here you're looking at stocks and shares ISAs, which gives you the ability to invest some of that money, not just hold it in cash. Now, for investments, it's very specific and individual. So from my perspective as an advisor, I'll sit down with a client and a key conversation we'll have is around risk. Now, understanding what your risk profile is crucial to knowing how you should be investing this money, because it's all very well and good listening to somebody on TikTok say that you should track the S&P 500, but actually, if you haven't got the risk profile for a 100% equity portfolio, then that's not the right advice for you. You need to understand where you sit on that scale, both from a time horizon perspective, which is how long have you got before you need to access this money, tolerance for loss. So that's thinking in your head, okay, if I was to lose this money, how would it impact my standard of living? And then also your appetite. Could you sleep at night if the markets were volatile? If you lost, when I say lost, if the value of your investment went down by 40% over a short period of time, could you live with that? Could you still sleep at night? You might say yes now, but when it actually happens, that could be a very different thing. So ultimately, if the answer is no to that, then you shouldn't be in a 100% equity portfolio. So understanding that's critical. But this third part is what's going to generate you your long-term growth, and ultimately is what's going to do the most in making sure that your future self will thank you now. So the second principle is the concept of paying yourself first. Now, I have touched on this in a previous video where I explained the benefits of firstly understanding what you can pay yourself and how much, and then the sort of benefits of automating that as best as you can, and then reassessing as time goes on. I call it the AC/DC structure, which is essentially to analyze, to calculate, to set up your direct debits, and then calibrate over time as your circumstances change, maybe your budget changes. But ultimately, this principle ensures that you stick to something. Now, it's far better to be reasonable than rational in this sense. It's very easy to sit here and say, well, if you put £500 a month in every month for the next 20 years, you'll get this massive pot of money at the end. Well, yeah, you would, but life gets in the way of that. So be reasonable, be consistent, and that's your best bet of being sustainable over the long term. So the benefits of paying yourself first are that it's effectively treated like a bill, except you're not paying a utility company or a broadband company, you're paying yourself, and you will thank yourself for it down the line. So automate as much as you can. Firstly, you need to go back through your expenses. That might be a month, 3 months is better. And it's a bit of a painful process, and nobody really likes, it's a bit like looking in the mirror and looking at all your flaws, but from a financial perspective. But it needs to be done to ensure that you're doing this correctly. You can then wean out any of those unnecessary expenses, but also realistically, you just need to find out how much excess income you have on a month-to-month basis. Set that then so that at the start of each month, you're making that payment to yourself. Now, not all of that needs to go into your pension, for example, which you can't access until age of 57. It could be your long-term stocks and shares ISA. It could be topping up your short-term savings. You need to firstly understand that you've got those 3 pots from that first principle all lined up correctly, and then you'll understand where that money needs to be directed. So once that's set up and it's automated on a month-by-month basis and you don't even notice you're doing it, that's when you're on the right track. So when I referred back to AC/DC, the last C there is about calibrating. And that's essentially reassessing from time to time, because hopefully your income increases over time and your lifestyle hopefully doesn't increase completely proportionally so that you've got no excess income left over. What you should be doing with that increased income is paying yourself more in the future. It's very easy when you start earning more money to get sucked into lifestyle inflation, a bigger house, a nicer car. We've all done it. But where you can, you need to also have an eye on the future. And if it means that you can increase what you can pay into your pension or into your ISA, then you should be looking at that as well. Paying into a pension can be very straightforward if you do it through your work. An employer paying a contribution into your pension may also increase their contribution if you were to increase your employee contribution. So understand exactly what that structure looks like. That might be the most efficient thing to do as and when you start earning more money. Everything I've just spoken about there all lead back to that principle of paying yourself first and why it's so important to your financial planning. The third principle is pound cost averaging. It sort of ties in with the paying yourself first second principle about automating monthly payments, but it sort of explains the importance of regular payments over ad hoc lump sum contributions into your long-term savings. Pound cost averaging effectively negates the need for you to try and time the market, which you should never do as a real core principle of investing. It means that you're never wondering about whether now is the right time or the wrong time, and you're keeping yourself honest by consistently putting a consistent, regular amount into your investments over time. This principle also protects you over the long term. Now, markets are volatile, but if you're consistently dripping money into your investments or savings over the long term, then you're effectively mitigating that risk of contributing your investments in at the wrong times. Now, this works both ways. It works for accumulation and decumulation. So that theory is applied whether you're contributing into your investments while you're still working, but also when you're pulling down from your investments, whether that be in retirement or whether you're pulling down from for a different reason. You might have a period where you're out of work and there's a bridging period. It works the same way then. So taking lump sums out can be quite dangerous and really detrimental to your investments if it's done at the wrong time. Whereas if you're pulling down small amounts consistently over the long term, you're going to have far less of an impact to your investment over the long term. So this principle works both ways, when you're both contributing into your investments, plus also when you're coming out of your investments. Pound cost averaging can make sure that you're negating the risk of timing this when the markets are not in your favor. Pound cost averaging works both ways. So when you're accumulating into your portfolio, but also when you're decumulating on the other side. That might be in retirement, for example. Now, there's a few different ways that you can approach a decumulation strategy. And as a financial planner, we use different types of strategies for different clients. But quite typically, we might keep back a year or two's worth of income in cash, and the rest of the portfolio remains invested. That means that we're never forced to sell from the investment portfolio if the markets are in a bad patch, because we know we've got enough cash as a buffer to cover the income that we know needs to be paid. So pound cost averaging works both on the way up and on the way down. So if you're following all these principles, you're already on the right track. However, if you want to take the next step, then you really need to engage with a financial planner.